All right, Eric. Phoenix Culture Podcast number 2. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited for this. Um, it's hard. I mean, we've been writing website stuff, we've been writing copy, we've been doing social posts. It's really difficult to convey some of the background or the why or the reasons that go into programs like this. People only get to see like the end product. Um, but being able to convey the reasons, the goals, the hopes, the aspirations, the energy behind it, I'm super excited about. So let's do this.
Same here. I'm so stoked. And yeah, I think there's so much behind the challenge. And how it's been landing for people right now is like 4 challenges, see how long you can do them. But I'm excited to dive into the context behind them and actually share more than the fact that it's just 4 challenges. So we have the warrior frame. So the first things first is we decided to go with the warrior frame this time, the warrior 100. After our first challenge, the hero 100. And we did this for a very specific intentional reason. So do you want to riff a little bit on why we chose warrior as a frame? What is it about warrior cultures that felt like it mapped onto what we're doing here, with the warrior 100 challenge?
Yeah, fantastic. Probably two core reasons for sure. The first is that it was the only thing that was the natural extension, the natural second step after the Hero 100. If nothing else, I think the archetypes are extremely useful models for an individual. And if you go back to kind of Carl Jung and his work on the archetypes and the four classic, often presented as the four classic masculine archetypes, king, warrior, magician, lover, you start with the hero. The hero is kind of the aligned child archetype. And when stewarded successfully, the positive traits of the hero become the embodied and integrated warrior. So if we were going to evolve and add a second step after the hero 100, it felt only appropriate to actually serve up the warrior, actually giving people the ability to take the second step in their own personal process. Yeah, and there's several characteristics of that we can talk more about. The second is that I think collectively, socially, culturally, we're running up against a really sensitive challenge right now, which is, for very good reasons, there's a level of resistance to warrior energy in modern culture right now. Shadow, I think the best way to say it is shadow versions of the warrior have done perhaps the most damage collectively throughout human history, right? You think of just unhinged soldiers and the tragedies of warfare, like those are all perpetuated technically by warrior energy and warrior archetypes. But the thing that makes this a very sensitive challenge that we're up against is that the warrior energy itself, the pure, aligned, accessible warrior archetype and warrior energy, is fundamentally important. It is a driver of action. It is a driver of change. It is a driver of culture. It is a driver of just an individual's life. It's like this motivating, energizing, activating, focusing force. And you suffer greatly, individually and collectively, with the absence of the warrior energy and archetype in your life, in culture's life. And so, yeah, we have this like balancing act right now where it's that we have a fundamental need for the warrior, but all of the examples we currently have are really poor. They're unaligned, they're immature, they're shadow manifestations. And so we need this training ground. We need a school. We need an outlet to actually holistically develop and course correct against the shadow elements of the warrior energy and the warrior archetype. So both of those, like the natural evolution of the hero and the need for real, like heart-centered, aligned, accessible warrior energy is, yeah, starting point for why we're cooking this up.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you're saying all of that, I'm just sitting with this in myself, and also I see it in so many people around me, this like staying in the possibility space. I notice like this feeling I get that it feels really comfortable for me and so many people I see around me, of to just like look at all of the things happening in the world, and there's so much happening, and I'm like, well, I could help the world in this way, maybe that way, and all of these like potential avenues feel pretty exciting. But then I never actually walk in any of the directions because it feels like, I don't know, there's this fundamental, it's almost like a fear of missing out or something that I feel like governs a lot of what
Oh,
I see in culture right now. Is like, if I do this one thing, I'm going to miss out on all these other potential opportunities. And with social media, with the internet, with how much we have information we have access to digitally, we're always going to miss out on something. And yeah, it feels like warrior energy is really important because it is choosing one thing and having disciplined action and execution towards that thing for a sustained period of time. And actually, and I think we'll get to this as well. This courage and discipline, but also where it's coming from. And I think that's what you were hitting at, of how warrior energy has wreaked havoc throughout history, is if it's motivated by something
oh.
less than the true, the good, and the beautiful, it can really wreak havoc. But if we really orient it and have the starting place be, I want to create a more beautiful world, then the warrior energy can be utterly transformational on a cultural level.
Oh, yeah, that landed. That landed really nicely. Um, yeah, one of the things that I think makes the warrior the healthy embodiment or the healthy evolution of the hero is that the warrior runs up against and runs towards its own limitations. I think the hero, like the heroic framing and the hero archetype is, I think, a necessary starting point, because almost a frustrating but necessary starting point, because it's like, okay, we need to give people who feel the call some level of inspiration, some willingness to take like total responsibility for themselves. That's both like the blessing and the curse of the hero. Is like, it's all my responsibility, I'm going to save the world. And there is a seed of beautiful energy in that, of like, yo, I'm part of this, I can be responsible for it. But this almost ignoring of limitation, or this belief of being limitless, is like the Achilles heel of the warrior, of the hero. Like, it's actually something that needs to be worked on and worked through. Like, no, you are a finite being, you're not going to be here forever, you have limited time, energy, attention, and resources. And yeah, it's the process. It's why training and refinement is so essential in the warrior archetype. Is like, okay, great, you do have this potential, you can be molded into anything, you can go put your energy behind anything you want. There comes a point where you actually have to pick. Comes a point where you have to make a decision, make a call, and actually follow through with that. And yeah, yeah, it's like life level FOMO. Like, oh, I could do so many things. Like, you could sit in that space of, yeah, I could do so many things for 5 decades, and then you've done nothing. Like, or you could pick one thing. My partner actually confronted me with this, because I've suffered from this, still do in many ways. Um, she was like, you can do everything sequentially, not simultaneously. Like, if you did one thing, saw it through to completion, you could do more after it. But if you're trying to do 8 all at once, you're often not going to do any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Yeah, the need to commit, the need to choose, the need to focus, absolutely huge. Absolutely huge.
No, 1000%. And yeah, I want to share a little anecdote from the Warrior or the Hero 100. And like now, I think this is something so many people run up against. And and like you said, getting from, I think we've used a negative 101 frame in the past of, am I coming from a place of apathy, coming from a place of like solid self-worth, or am I coming from a place of like joy and beauty? And and I've noticed in myself the shift from -1 to 0 feels huge. And the Warrior is trying to come from 1, but even like, all right, so we have this journaling challenge in the Hero 100. So showing up every day for journaling. In my process, I've noticed almost like 50% of the days what I'll journal about is like, holy crap, I have the capacity to do stuff. Like this feels great to sit in the fact that I have the capacity to show up every day, and I have been showing up every day. And there we're on day 70 something of the challenge, and it's like it feels really good to see all of what we call like votes for the identity that we want. I look at all of these blue check boxes of the challenges that I've completed since day one, and it feels really, really good to be like, I have the capacity to show up. But what I've been getting frustrated with recently has been, I don't know how to break. It feels like it almost is starting to feel like a glass ceiling, where it's like, yes, I journaled 50 days in a row that I have the capacity. The capacity is there, and that feels really good. But what now? And I've talked about this with some people um, who have named it the fear, or sorry, not the fear, the inherent risk in making choices. Um, some of the people that I've talked with have said that if if you're making a choice to do something, to go down a certain life path, to work on a certain project, if there's no risk in the choice, and it's not a real choice, is basically how it was conveyed to me. And they basically say, yeah, if you're choosing to do something, you're choosing not to do everything else, and that is inherently risky. At the core, that is, you are risking your time to say that this is what I think is important and has the most potential and will do the best for me and for the collective. And you might be wrong. You might be wrong. And that's what I think we have to sit with. When I sit with like, what does it mean to be a warrior? And like, what is it that the warrior is training and stepping into? To me, it's like that feeling of, this might not be the right thing. This might be the wrong path, but continuing to move forward. And then eventually later you'll see if it was right or wrong, like in reflection, and then you can alter your course. But there's like this deep unsettling feeling that I've noticed of like, I'm choosing this thing. I don't know that it's the right thing. The world is very complex, and there's so many facets of ways that I could show up. But it's like I feel like what the hero trains and how it turns into the warrior, and kind of what you were saying, is there's this deep rooted self-worth that comes with, I'm gonna vote for this project. I'm gonna vote for this course of action. And I think that this is what the world needs right now. And like that there's a certain energy behind that I don't feel is common in culture, of like, I am confident
Ooh.
enough in my decision that this is the right thing, that I'm going to seek it through. Because I've noticed in myself that a lot of times I'm just not confident that that thing is the thing. And if I'm not confident in the initial decision, how am I going to have warrior energy for 100 days to see it through? Um, so like this confidence in the original decision is also, I feel like, a warrior trait.
Yeah, it's something like fear is not an adequate excuse not to do anything. It's just like you're waiting, many of us just wait for some level of absolute certainty or crystal clear confidence. And it's like, well, that's never going to show up. Are you just going to sit around and do nothing in the meantime? There's always that part in, actually, I don't know why, but while you were speaking, the thing that came up to me is like cliche situations in scary movies. You know, you got like 5 people, they're in some dangerous situation. And the person you almost always roll your eyes at is when something serious is happening and the person is just paralyzed. They're just like sitting there frozen, literally frozen, overwhelmed by the situation, unable to handle the energy, not making decisions, not doing anything. And it's like, well, I mean, the only thing we can kind of guarantee with that is that you're not getting out of that situation. Like, you're going to be there as long as you're frozen there.
Yeah.
And so, and again, like, a great way to, I think, frame a lot of this is that a lot of these things are like muscles that you can build. They are skills that you can cultivate, but it's how do you cultivate an abstract thing like core confidence in the face of uncertainty, courage in the face of fear? Like, it's just nebulous. You actually have to pick something, use something as a sparring partner, as a place of study, and build it through analogous ways, techniques, tools, trainings, and it works. So yeah, like, if one of the things we can teach someone is like, I know what I am in service of, I have core confidence in my ability to not only make a decision but course correct, because I can make another decision after that. You know, you can keep going, and my ability to see it through. You can handle pretty much anything that comes up in your life if you can do those things. I have my why. I know why the fuck I'm doing this. I know that I can exert force in the world, and I know that I can keep doing that over time. Like, you would surprise yourself with what you cannot do if you have that. But again, it's very helpful to have built that muscle, to have cultivated that skill before you need it. It's like proactivity instead of reactivity.
Yeah. No, totally. And what was coming up for me as you were saying that, I want to like keep going along the thread that you started pulling there. And the first thing is like content versus structure. I think we talked about this a bit with the Hero 100, but doing the challenges is more than just doing the challenges, right? It's like doing the challenges, you're getting more out of them than just learning how to meditate, learning how to like doing a little bit of self-reflection with journaling, or like doing physical training. It's actually building these abstract character traits. So you're like, how do you build courage in the face of fear? How do you build deep integrity with yourself? How do you build like increasing your ability to focus? And it's like, these are things that we're developing. And sure, the meditation, the physical training, the study is great, and you will get a lot of out of those things in and of themselves, but you'll also get this, that's like the content of the challenges, but the deep structure is also like we're building these abstract character traits. And what is it that you can, how is it that you can show up in the world differently if you have these abstract character traits, is almost like, who knows, like you can show up in ways that you aren't currently showing up in, the possibilities are endless. And also you can learn, going back to like, you could do anything, but
Yeah.
the one point I wanted to hit is, especially in modern culture, the inability to focus and to have discipline is so destructive. And so, you know, if you can't focus for more than half an hour on one thing, that's a problem in and of itself. And if you can't sustain a commitment to something over the course of more than a month, that's another thing. And so I just get lit up by the possibility, by imagining how would my life be different if I had not only the ability to sit down and focus for at least 1 to 2 hours of uninhibited focus on something, and what if I was able to do that for months on end, perhaps years on end in the same direction, where is it that I could go that I currently can't? I mean, that is what it excites me about developing the skill of discipline, focus, courage, and then integrity. Also, where am I moving? That's it. I feel the integrity part. Am I moving in the right direction with that focus? Very exciting though.
Yeah, because one of the things I want to pull into this is it's very easy for someone to say, oh, we live in the safest point in human history. I'm not part of the military. What possible way could being a warrior benefit my life? Right. And that comes from this very myopic, this very narrow definition of warrior only as soldier. And we have two different words for good reason. They're not the exact same. For example, like how many uncomfortable conversations have you been unwilling to have in your life because they're sustained tension? You actually have to get into an uncomfortable space for an extended period of time. And most of the time you're just like, nah, I'm not going there. Same thing with your, career progression, your frustration with that person at work. And you could zoom that out into much, much bigger levels of like, are you happy with the trajectory that modern culture is going in? Right? Are you willing to do anything about that? Do you feel actually stable, rooted, grounded, solid enough to actually take a stand for your own values? Right? Something like warrior energy is essential for establishing boundaries in your own life, actually being able to root down and say, no, this is where I draw the line. I'm sorry. That takes this focused, strong, composed stance that is virtually synonymous with healthy, embodied warrior energy. Right? It's maybe another aspect of this is I loved your point of like, okay, well, Jesus, you said 30 minutes. I would put it at 1 minute for most people. Like, can you hold this? It's kind of sad, but it's also kind of true. Like, can you actually focus on something for more than a minute before your attention goes yeet, like over to the side, over to your phone, over to the noise over there? For a lot of people, that's a no, which is, insane. The same thing for can you hold the tension? Can you focus on something for more than 1 month? If your answer to both of those is no, it's hard to actually list them all out, but you severely limit the scope of anything that you can really do in your life. All right. Do you think you could raise beautiful children like that? Do you think you could release that artistic masterpiece that you've had inside of you? Do you think you could even cultivate deep, meaningful relationships with that? Like, the answer is largely no. Anything that is really, really meaningful over the long run in your life will take a level of persistence, you could say discipline, and sustained focus over time. And again, this is one of the things that gets lost where it's like, fortunately, you can actually train those specifically. There are techniques spanning back millennia for how to literally cultivate focus and concentration. Same thing with discipline, stamina, persistence. You can actually train these things. And whether it's for yourself in your own life, whether it's for your family and their quality of life, or whether it's for your culture and the world and the future of humanity, like, are you willing to do that? Like, are you willing to show up for that? Because you can train it. It's possible.
Yeah. You used the word myopic at one point. And there's this, I also want to address this possible justification that I have in myself, and I imagine many people have, of why to not train warrior traits, is that why I don't currently see any situations in my life where I need them. And there's this certain like oh, like my life is all right. Like I have good friends, I have a decent career, and like I don't need to like set extreme boundaries with people, or like maybe like, oh, I feel comfortable in my ability to set boundaries. And one of the points that feels necessary to make is that it's being ready when it comes. Um and this could be, you could take the broader cultural frame here of the rate at which intense cultural level events are happening that are like really challenging, like COVID being one. You have like wildfires happening left and right. Like the whole US is being hit by like bad air quality. You have like there's, in myself, there's just this recognition that these aren't going to stop happening, that these events with huge magnitude are going to keep hitting us when we least expect it. Um, and are we ready when it does happen, to show up in a way where we don't get utterly destroyed and leveled to the ground by them? And so one of the points that I want to make here is training warrior traits is not because it's needed in this very moment, but because things will happen in our lives where they will be absolutely needed, and either we'll get leveled by them or we'll have the courage and the strength to confront them when they do happen.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I have some somewhat hokey points on this because like I totally agree. Um yeah, I think it was fairly evident both during and certainly in hindsight that most people got completely wrecked by COVID. And I don't mean like physically ill. I mean like succumbing to fear immediately, um, inability to cope with changes in lifestyle, right? You know, boredom, like just super basic stuff. Most people just got flatlined, like just absolutely leveled. Um, yeah, and so there's two stances to this. This is one of the things. This is why I think we almost need a reinvention. We need a revitalization of the warrior archetype, because again, I think we have a terrible focus of it. One of the things that really shocked me in exploring kind of history and culture of the warrior energy and the warrior archetype was that I believe, so personal opinion, I believe that most people think that the defining trait of a warrior is discipline. You know, they just show up every day and they're always training, blah, blah. Definitely a huge part. I believe that the true defining trait of a warrior is that they are in service of a cause greater than themselves. That is the true thing that is synonymous, not synonymous, universal across warrior cultures and warrior history. They are in service of ideals, right? The true, the good, the beautiful. They're in service of the kingdom, the family, their loved ones, their neighborhood, whatever it is. They're submitted in service of something greater than themselves. I bring this up following your point because if someone actually genuinely was like, I do not see an area in my life where warrior energy would be necessary right now, I would say that's only because you are myopically focused on your own damn life. Like the world is being bulldozed across almost every domain right now. And it's like, if you can't see ways that you could show up in the world, you're not paying attention, or you're only paying attention to yourself. Almost synonyms at that point. So that's one point. Like if you can't identify anything that could benefit from someone standing strong and unmoving in support of it, whether it's anything, the rights of different classes of culture, the future of the ecosystem, even just monetary policy, like all of it needs this strong populace. Definitely comes from warrior energy. And I don't, I think it takes like 5 minutes of actually sitting with someone to find that thing, or most likely those things that have just been put on the back burner, that are too overwhelming, that are too complex, that are too hard, that are too scary, right? I'm not really satisfied in my relationship, but I don't want to say anything. I really wanted to learn how to play guitar, but God, it's so hard to start. Um, or like more dramatic things like what is going to happen if it hasn't already? What is going to happen when your father dies and everyone is a wreck, right? Are you also just going to get wrecked by that? Or are you going to take it upon yourself to actually rise up to that? And again, if you haven't prepared for that, you will probably just get wrecked. Which is not necessarily a problem, right? Compassion for everyone. Like you're doing good, but it comes down to like, who the fuck do you want to be when it is actually needed for people to show up for it? And again, this is the kind of evolution from hero to warrior, right? It's not solely your responsibility, right? You are not the lone savior of the world, but it's more like, are you ready to show up like the 300 Spartans and actually be able to perform with your shield and your sword beside other people who have also shown up? I think it's an opportunity and I think it's an obstacle. And again, we just come back to this day in, day out. It's like, yeah, it would be nice to be ready for that, to feel ready, to have the embodied knowledge of like, I don't even care what comes tomorrow. Like, I can do this. I'm here for it. I have support. I have people. Let's go. Yeah.
Man, I got chills when you give some of those examples, like the father dying one. It's like there's inevitabilities in life on a long enough time scale, and at some
Yeah.
point that these things will have to be faced eventually. um, and yeah, I was sitting with this. I almost want to take it out a little bit, where this viewpoint that we must only focus on ourselves as a viewpoint of our culture that a lot of us have taken
Oof.
on in ourselves. And and like it almost feels to me like a prerequisite to really seeing like how we can show up for something greater than ourselves is to like notice that this frame, that if we focus on ourselves only, then somehow that will help the world as well. Or there's just this, I know, I all right, living in America, I noticed that this is really strong of, I must take care of my family. Like if you have a family and you're raising children, it's like I can only focus on taking care of my family, because because it's really hard to make money, and I need to like find a way to like make money and support my family. And like this is the highest good. At least this is how it lands for me. Is like it feels like the highest good to so many people in America, myself included many times. Is like I just need to find a way to support myself, and that is the highest good. And like making money is the highest good, because it's how I support myself. And something that pokes that lens for me was, I was listening to a conversation, and the point that was being made was, eventually on a long enough time horizon, that leads to like collapse of like culture, because we're all focusing on ourselves and no one else. And ultimately, if we are to show up for culture, and ultimately if we want to see a better world, we have to realize, the point being made was, we have to realize that like if we want the world to succeed, we have to see that the success of our family unit is dependent on the success of the world. um and also not to take the lone wolf mentality, that I think there's also the trap here of like, I must be the savior of the world. And that's not what I'm saying at all. It's that we need to, like you said, come together shoulder to shoulder and be like, I want to band together with hundreds of people, thousands of people who want to see that more beautiful world as well. Because I know that in doing that, that it will have ripple effects back on the family unit, on the individual unit. And yeah, ultimately, how can I be happy if everyone around me is suffering and the world is collapsing? There's no possible way to be happy in that situation. And when I sit with that, it's like, oh yeah, of course I need to be in service of something larger than myself.
And I will say, if you have a family, like if you're, I mean, we're both male. Like if you're a father, it's a great example because it's both. Warrior energy will be very helpful in your own life, right? Discipline, stamina, persistence, imparting good values. And it can also be a great gift to the world, right? Steward well the future of humanity, steward the future of society. Both very beautiful.
And yeah, not to discount the family unit either. There's also a sub point of like both ends, like serve your family and serve the collective at this, like at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the thing that's very present for me right now is something like I always joke because I think it's a nice I think it like reframes things sometimes, which is like, do you really want your tombstone when you're dead to say something like, yeah, I did a really good job optimizing my salary? Like, is that truly the thing you want people to say in your epilogue? Like, probably not. And yet, the day in, day out embodied actions most of us take are something like, yeah, I was conscientious with my money. I made sure I didn't spend too much. It's just entirely focused on, I mean, I agree with your point. It's fundamentally focused on money. And most people use the cognitive game of like, oh yeah, I just need to support myself. Where it's, well, it's like, how much does your life cost to support? You're probably already earning more than that, right? Like, have you switched then? Like, you met that threshold. Of course, it often doesn't switch. It just becomes this perpetual game. Yeah, there's something of like, part of the beauty of freedom is, yeah, you can pick whatever you want. You can act whatever way you want to have that thing written on your tombstone. But there is something of like, I don't know. There's a cohort of people who want something like, I became the greatest living example of myself that I could, for myself and for the, to your point, like for the people, for the world, for the culture around me. I took the domain of chaos that was in my control. I made some order out of it. Right. I showed up in that way. And if you feel that, the question then becomes, how are you going to do it? Like, do you have a path? Do you have a program? Do you have a protocol? Like, how do you train integrity? How do you become an honorable person? Right? How do you become strong of body, mind, spirit, heart? Right? Like, yeah, that question has largely led us here. Of like, okay, I need a thing. I need a practice. I need a path. I need a protocol so I can train this, because when it gets difficult, there's a very, very classic quote. Something like, we never rise to the level of our expectations. We always fall to the level of our training. And if you've had a long day, let's imagine a future hypothetical, right? You're a family man, you have wife and kids, you've had a super long day of work, you're stressed out, it's just getting hard. You come home, your daughter's like bouncing around. Like, do you really want to get exhausted and just lash out in anger? Like, is that because when you're stressed, when you're tired, when there's a lot of chaos, right? Have you trained the ability to be rooted, to be calm, to lead with your heart, Like you can train these things. I don't think many people do. So we end up in situations and circumstances of just exploding in anger, of collapsing into vices. And yeah, the opportunity is, well, train an increased baseline in yourself. You can train an increased baseline in matters of the heart, in sticking to your virtues, right? These are things that you can actually like, quote unquote, improve upon. Like you can build the muscle of never wavering from your values. Like that is something that you can actually practice doing. It's very difficult to do kind of just by yourself, but there are ways that you can do that. And yeah, I'd like my own baseline to just like, I'd like to increase my baseline. Like these are my hard boundaries. I'm not willing to trade my integrity for $10,000, right? Like not trading my honor for likes on social media. Like there are lines that you have a choice on where they end up.
So many threads here. So many good points. I want to name that integrity and honor and like virtues don't look any specific way. You made the point that like they're gonna look different for every single person. And so I was tracking that. All right, you were giving these examples, and I was tracking that. All right, you made the example of like you finish a long day of work, you're stressed, you lash out at your kids. No one wants to do that. But I also want to note that it can look so many different ways. Like I also want to note that like that virtue is not that just not lashing out at your kids is also not virtue. Because what I was tracking is like I was tracking as you were saying that, I was like, there's an opposite that's equally as bad also, which is you become avoidant, you're stressed, the child brings you this joy of something great that happened to them. And you're like, I'm too stressed to listen to you right now. I'm too burnt out. I don't have the capacity to hold what you're saying, to be with you in a loving, caring way. And instead I'm gonna go drink or something. I don't know. And like that's equally as bad as like getting mad at them and yelling at them. Right. There's like two opposites. And it's like what I'm tracking is there's this, when I sit with integrity, it's this honesty that like hurts almost. On both sides of that spectrum, there's an honest truth that's like, oh, I'm actually not showing up with care, love, compassion, goodness. I don't know. I like there's certain traits that are not being inhabited in that space. And yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. I do think the money point is relevant here, because so much of this is like, yeah, when I've sat so much in myself, I can see it, and I can see it in so many people of, I don't have the capacity to show up with these virtues because I'm not financially secure. That feels like a huge thing, especially like I've felt that in myself, and I've been feeling it a lot of, yeah, I don't feel secure enough in my ability to support my family financially. Therefore, I'm going to justify not showing up with virtues or something like that. Is something that in myself, I see myself making decisions not to pursue things that bring me joy, because I'm like, well, no, I need to figure out how to be financially more stable. And I've used that excuse for years and years and years, and it hasn't really changed. And so I think it's relevant here, because something I've been sitting with recently is the following. What is financial security? It's having an inflow of money and being able to support yourself. And how do you do that? And the common answer is, I go get a job. and the job pays me money. What I've been sitting with is that getting a job is no more secure than like starting a business and serving the world in some way. That they, if you're working a job, they have the power to fire you at any single moment, and then you're back at square one. And ultimately, and this is where I this is how the one part of the warrior thing lands for me, is being a warrior is showing up in the world with these values and operating in the arenas of the world where that are in place. Like we can't just be like, oh, all right, this is the system that's currently operating. Like there's a certain, like, I have to show up in the arenas that are already there. So let's say like business. Is there a way for me, what I'm trying to get at is financial security is what services or values am I offering the world? And how is that landing with people? And are they getting value at it? And is it being returned to me? And something I've been sitting with is like, being a warrior is also, I'm going to show up and make people's lives better. And maybe that is in the context of business, but I'm going to approach it every single day with, sure, there's a business. How do I actually serve people in a way that genuinely makes their lives better? And how do I do that at scale? And I think it requires that saying no to so many temptations in business. I think that's what you were naming also. Like there's so many temptations to sell my soul to the highest bidder. But I think there's also a way to go about serving people, maybe in a business arena, that doesn't involve selling my soul to the highest bidder. And that is no less, there's just as much security in that as in seeking a 9 to 5, is I think what I wanted to land on. Is that security is just something that we make up, and having warrior traits in the world is, it can be security in that too, and showing up and doing the difficult, risky thing.
Oh, wow. That was fantastic. Yeah. Got super excited hearing that. It is symptomatic. It is symptomatic. It is demonstrative of where we are in human history, that you can ask someone, you know, what's the ideal annual salary you want? What are you working towards there? Right? Almost everyone will have a number, right? If you ask someone like, what virtues are you attempting to embody more in your life right now? Motherfuckers will be like, I couldn't even name 2 virtues for you. Like, I don't have personal values. Like, what does that mean? And it's just like, this is the point. Like, that is a somewhat depressing, but actually very dangerous reality, right? It's a very dangerous reality if you want a stable, resilient kind of culture and human ecosystem, right? Prioritizing the cultivation of virtue and values in your life is fundamental. That was one. Your point on again, yeah, you can't control the future. You can't predict the future. And one of the reasons actually that people look for things that they feel make them secure in the world is because they are not secure in themselves. They are not rooted, grounded, stable, functional. It's actually really funny. One of the first things you do in Qigong, a martial art, is learn how to stand. Like, learn how to actually make a foundation where you can't be moved. If you are stable and secure in yourself, and that means like, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and I know what I'm capable of. This is the part of running up against your own limits, right? That is one of the Achilles heels of the hero. It's like, you're not unlimited. You are limited. Where specifically are your limits? What are your weaknesses? Like, know them intimately instead of avoiding them. And if you can do that, and you get a very honest appraisal of yourself, there comes 2 things: a level of stability and security. Again, just this, it doesn't really matter what tomorrow brings, because I've cultivated a level of stability. I know that I can make a decision. I know that I can act on it. I know that I can do that in a way that does not cross my personal boundaries. Yeah, that brings a level of stability. I also want to invite a flip to this, which is not all of this is just avoiding negative, right? Not all of this is just don't do bad shit. There are genuine, very real, very visceral, positive outcomes from trainings like this. One is perhaps very fundamental, is a level of self-respect that is actually fairly hard to get otherwise. One of the ways integrity kind of shows up, or one of the ways I would define integrity is your actions, your words, your communication, and your thoughts, like your ideas, are all the same thing. They all line up. You don't think something and do something else, right? You don't do something that goes against what you said you were going to do. They're all actually in alignment. Alignment of thoughts, words, and deeds is integrity. And honestly, if you do that, if you can become a person who does that, the way you feel about yourself when you're by yourself will be incredibly better. All right. When you actually look in the mirror, your life may not be freaking perfect. It may not be beautiful. I'm not saying this is going to lead you to utopia, but you can look and be like, we are here. We are doing this. Like that level of self-respect that comes from that, from integrity and alignment, is insane. The other points, like, again, warrior is synonymous with training mind, training body, training spirit, training heart. Across all of those, the better you get in all of those domains, the better you actually feel. You might feel physically better because your body is strong, capable, fluid, mobile. Having someone who's done any level of meditation, I think, realizes this. A calm, controlled mind is like inherently beautiful. Like it feels intrinsically good and exciting just to be calm and awake. Like just to be focused, to be present actually just feels intrinsically good. Yeah, knowing that you can be truthful, which sounds super weird to say, but like you expend an insane amount of cognitive energy juggling lies. And I don't mean like super extreme lies. I just mean like, I don't really want to tell my friend that I don't think they look good today. So given their personality, I'm going to try to say a comment like that. Like you just do all these mental gymnastics because you're unwilling to have the baseline of your life be, I'm going to tell the truth as it is, as directly as I can, period. Which is synonymous with warrior archetype. Like a deep commitment to the truth is one of those transpersonal commitments that is often associated with the warrior energy. And so, yeah, I just want to bounce. Like, I agree. And I'll make the argument all day of like, there are a lot of things we can avoid. There are a lot of things we need to stand up for and against. But also, the cultivation of these qualities is just beautiful in and of itself, because the quality of your consciousness, the quality of your life that comes from it, seems to get better and better. Like it doesn't seem to be much of an upper limit.
Absolutely. Have a sense that there's a really relevant direction to take this. The first point I want to hit here is, I think we've talked about this in terms of Warrior 100, like the nature of actually like loving yourself is that
Mm,
has self-respect woven in it.
yeah.
And we can critique like how self-love is viewed all we want, but like the essence of it is like if you're not showing up for yourself in the ways that actually help you build capacities, like being present and showing up for the things that you love consistently, the things that bring you joy, the things that showing up for things larger than yourself, then like that there's that actually, yeah. Sorry, lost my train of thought. The What I was getting at was to show up every day for meditating, for increasing the clarity of my consciousness, show up every day and being active, like moving my body, to show up every day and to build things that I love. Like these are acts of discipline that inherently have self-love woven in them, because the underlying narrative is I respect myself enough to show up consistently for the things that I know transform my consciousness in a way that is more loving towards myself. If I know that being stressed and anxious and frenetic all the time it has an inherent flavor of suffering to it. Like everyone knows
Mm,
this. When you're
yeah.
anxious all the time, there's suffering in that. And so the most self-loving thing to do is to show up every single day for meditation, whether you want to or not, and to actually train the opposite trait in yourself. And I think this is, I think a lot of the sort of fitness discipline influencers online actually get this part right, which is showing up for yourself and having discipline for, let's say, exercise is, even when you don't want to, is inherently like that has self-respect, self-love woven into it. um if I it's not an act of self-love to be like, I know I should work out because it's good for me, but I don't want to, so I'm not gonna. Like that has no flavor of like I truly respect and love myself in it. um yeah.
Yeah, there are two things here. I completely agree. There's a very real, and this is the like by yourself looking in the mirror thing. It's like, do you love yourself enough to be your best? To actually give yourself the possibility of seeing what you're capable of like actually pushing, not from this destructive, uh, yeah, not from a destructive, toxic place, but like literally, we can do great things. I'm a member of humanity. I can do this. And I'm willing to put myself to the test. I'm willing to actually go up against the limits. There is I would almost say either deeper or longer term version of self love there, right? It's not just like, I love myself enough to take a bath today. It's like, what are the host of actions and ways of being that I need to embody to love myself over the next 5 decades? Like, what does that look like? What does self love extended over decades look like? And I think it's something like holistic self mastery in service of other people, right? Like, make yourself extremely capable so that you can then go and like give it to the world or give it to whatever little neighborhood of existence is most relevant and most calling you. There's an equal and opposing side of this argument, which is I truly believe, I mean, because again, I live it day in, day out, as well as, oh, most people are just afraid of reality, like just afraid of the actual nitty gritty, mucky reality of existence. Like This is again synonymous with warrior cultures. Like, you are going to die. You actually don't even know when that is going to happen. You have a story, a kind of beautifully fictitious narrative that several decades from now, in the beauty of your sleep, you'll pass with a great sigh and everything will be calm, surrounded by loved ones. Like, you could get wrecked tomorrow. Do you like what you have done and become thus far? Like, the next way this shows up is like, anyone you've ever met in your life could have that happen to them tomorrow. Are there things you have left unsaid to them? Are there things you have left undone with them? Like, this is the true, because when you take that frame, right, really embodying the immediacy and imminence of your own limitation, most fundamental limitation being you're going to die at some unforeseen point. Like, have you done the things that death would compel you to do, right? Like, really having those vulnerable conversations, like really saying, wow, this hurt me a lot, I still love you deeply, like any of that thing. Like, and that's why earlier in the conversation when you were like, yeah, some people can't identify, or some people may not be able to identify why the warrior energy would be helpful in their life, is like, yeah, because you're not living in reality. You're living these fantasy concepts of, oh yeah, sure, I could learn that language. Oh, I could just, maybe in the next 10 years I'll go on that trip, or maybe eventually I'll say this to my partner. All just illusory ideas, right? Until you've actually done the thing, you can't do the thing. Like, does that make sense? This is something I think is worth like driving home. And again, I don't quite mean it. I don't mean it in this like uh put down negative attitude, but until you have done something, you can't do it. Like, until you've actually ridden a bike without training wheels, you can't ride a bike without training wheels. You could tell yourself a story that it's possible for you to be able to get to a point where you could ride a bike without training wheels, but until you've actually done the thing, you can't do the thing. That makes sense. And you are essentially on borrowed time for all of it. Like, and this is what I mean about the healthy integration of warrior energy is vitalizing. It is full presence here and now without distortion. That might be the way to say it. Like, trying to reduce distortion, trying to reduce the ways I am not intimately connected with reality, because this is where the world is happening. This is where my life is happening. Yeah, maybe I'll pause there.
There was an ethos that you brought to the current Hero 100 challenge that I think feels really relevant here, which is are you doing the thing right now? And I think that is also what you were just saying. That's also what you're just saying. But said in another way, I feel like it's valuable to say it in another way of how there's this certain importance that I'm getting of like looking at my life right now. Can I look at my life right now and how do I spend the 14 hours that I'm awake every single day? Like on like a micro level, how is each minute being spent is really important to look at. And we'll come to a lot of realizations about ourselves and where we're heading if we do this, right? If it's like, I want to, it feels so obvious, but yet I and many others don't do it, which is, oh, I want to like, I love writing. Let's say I love writing and I want to become a writer. How many minutes a day am I like training my capacity to not only become a better writer, but also taking the act of putting words on the page? If that is close to zero, then I am not honoring myself, respecting myself, and actually doing the thing that I know that I need to do. another thing is, I think you brought up like learning a language. If I want to like eventually go travel and learn a language, am I spending any time studying, like practicing speaking the language? If I'm not, then I'm not getting, and I don't know why it feels so simple, but yet so deep at the same time, which is like at the beginning of this conversation, you said you can't do everything simultaneously. You have to do things sequentially. And that feels like it ties in here, which is there's a choice that I need to make right now is what is the capacity? Like maybe there's like all these different capacities, all these different skills I want to learn. Maybe there's 10 of them. There, if you never do the thing, that none of them will get done. But said in a different way, it's like the warrior energy is that I right now have to choose which of those things is important for me to develop right now. And I have to choose to do the thing consistently until I'm happy with where my capacity is at. And then I'll move on to the next thing. And if I never choose one thing and spend time every single day doing the thing, then what are you moving towards at all? And I think this is what is so pernicious about the systems that, especially like social media, is like where our attention is getting spent is being chosen for us. And so I think there's just a very simple reframe here, which is, are you choosing where your attention is going? And when you're choosing it, is it going towards the thing that is most valuable to you every single day without fail? And so, yeah, I felt like just adding on and clarifying what you were just saying. But yeah, it's at least for me, it's very difficult to do that. A lot of times it's difficult to be like, where am I spending my time? Maybe I go look at my phone. Maybe I pull up my phone and look at the what is it called? The time tracker where it tells me how many minutes I spent on each app. Maybe I look at that and I'm like, damn, I spent 2 hours on these 3 apps. That's 2 hours of time I could spend, I don't know, writing, recording podcasts, doing reading, thinking, going out. And I don't know, there's so many things we could do with our time if we saw, oh, I'm spending 2 hours a day on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are the two big points. This is the definition of integrity, right? Do your actions align with what you say and what you think? Period. It's actually kind of freeing in a way because, yeah, this has come up. This came up in the Hero 100. I'm thinking of one woman in particular who, 50 days in was like, I still don't think I would call myself a meditator after meditating for 50 days straight. Supplies for writing. This is any identity you want. Most people have some story of like, oh, because I don't have a accreditation or a degree in it or a certification, I can't like do the thing. They got it backwards because the only thing required to become that identity is to do the thing that identity does. Like, yeah, again, it's one of these things where it's so fundamental, it seems obvious. Like the only thing required to become a writer is to regularly engage in the act of writing. That is the only thing. And actually, it's often the only thing that people don't do for the second reason, which is people are afraid of reality as it is. Because if I started writing, if I started publishing my writing, I would see how shit of a writer I am. And I don't want to see how limited my skill is. I would rather stay in the hero, savior, whimsical fantasy land of, oh, wow, I could write this magnum opus and such a good masterpiece. And because I literally don't do the one thing of writing, I never have to face the reality that my current skill, my current foundation of capability is not that yet. And I can live in this fantasy. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is you're never going to do the thing because you are never once taking the only step you need to take. And this is the same thing in across the board. You know, how many times have you cleaned your entire house? You know, have you sorted out your email inboxes because you were avoiding having the conversation with your partner that you needed to have? Right. Oh, I was just gearing myself up. I was just gathering the courage. I was just, you know, getting rid of any possible argument points that they could point to. I was preparing. It's like you're going to spend your whole life preparing to live. That's an absolute tragedy. So yeah, these two of like, and again, I have some opinions. I'm more concerned of like, I don't actually care what your answers are to like, what do you think? What do you want to do with your life? What do you care about? And are your actions in alignment with that? Whatever you want, man. You want to be an artist? Great. You want to be a doctor? Great. Like you want to sit and drink tea all day? Great. Are you in integrity with that? Like that is the thing. Can you look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I am doing the things that I say are important to me? That is like the most fundamental step to self-respect almost ever. And very few of us do it. And the second part is, yeah, I think you need to investigate how much you think you actually want to live in reality. Because if you're trying to write a book, if you're trying to make newsletters, if you're trying to become an artist, you have to go through the 500 terrible, terrible drafts. You have to confront your own limitation, which is like the essence of warrior training. You find your limit or your baseline and you increase it through deliberate practice, through training. And you can do that with your concentration. You can do that with your integrity. You can do that with your courage. Like, yeah, and there's both. Again, I would root this back in there are a lot of negatives you can avoid in doing that. And it's also just intrinsically beautiful to cultivate those things because the quality of your life, the quality of your everyday moment to moment waking consciousness changes because you're like, I chose this. I want to be here. I'm fully present and I'm showing up for it courageously. Like every moment, I know that I'm limited. I know that my time here is limited and I am dialed in. And that there's nothing inherently negative in that. Yeah. But it's deeply synonymous with warrior energy, right? You can take all of those traits I just listed out and put them in the context of a soldier, a dog of the military, and do some really horrible things. You could also put it behind art and save some people's lives with inspiration and motivation and activation, right? The warrior energy is not inherently negative. There are shadows, of course, masochistic shadows, like you suck, get better, sadistic shadows of like exerting insanely toxic force on the world. But there's also positive to this. There are very, very real virtues and values and gifts that the warrior brings to humanity, or that the warrior energy brings to individuals and humanity.
This is what we bring up multiple times, is that it break you before it rebuilds you. And I feel
Yeah.
not called out by what you said, but I'm through the current 100-day challenge that we're running, I'm feeling consistently exactly what you're talking about, which is with the writing. It's
Yeah.
showing up every single day for writing. And this is the it will break you and rebuild you thing is the first 30 days I felt great and I was writing so much and it was amazing. First 50 days. And now we're in day 70 and I've consistently felt for the last 20 days like my writing is absolute horseshit. My writing sucks and it's if you show up every day for yourself, eventually you will have to confront that you have to confront things within yourself that you don't want to confront. And so on the surface level, yeah, sure, there's I'm not great at writing and I want to be a writer and I'm not great at it. But I think there's actually something a little bit deeper here, which is fueling that, which is, what does that say about me? And
Yeah.
sure, like, it doesn't sound that difficult on the surface level to be like, oh, I need to confront the fact that I'm not a great writer. But what I've been noticing is that it's not just that. It's, oh, I'm not a great writer, therefore fill in the blank.
Dot dot dot.
Therefore, I am not a great human being, or therefore I don't have the capacity to show up to the things I like. There's these really deep stories that we have about ourselves. And to me, it's like that is what we need to face. And
Yeah.
if we don't ever show up for, let's say, the writing every single day, I think what we're actually avoiding is confronting these stories that we have about ourselves that tell us, or not only confronting these stories that, like, did myself and like endemic in our culture is I'm not good enough. Like, facing that I'm not good enough belief. But even more than that is like, it's not just facing the belief that I'm not good enough, but it's this fear that it'll get proven true. It's like I am afraid that if I show up and I suck at writing, that I will prove to myself this story that I desperately don't want to be the case, but somehow feel that it is the case. And so what I've noticed is that this warrior, this hero energy is I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to suck at writing, and I'm going to go through the painful grit of realizing that me sucking at writing is not the same thing as me not being good enough. And there's this fundamental like
Damn.
shift. There's this fundamental shift, which is I do suck at writing, and at the same time I'm rooted in my worth as a human being because I'm alive and I'm struggling, and like, and it's and I'm there's like there's like this choice. There's like this choice at the fundamental of it. I'm gonna choose to see that this struggle is not the same as this belief, and I'm going to choose to not believe that about myself. And
Yeah.
for me, the choice to not believe that about myself only comes after like grueling like pain, and like grueling like comes after weeks and weeks and weeks of sitting in the muck of like believing it but not knowing why I'm believing it, just like having it be a part of my identity. Then after a while, there's like this fork in the road, which is I can either choose to believe that I'm not good enough and that I suck at writing, or I can choose to see that I am good enough and I suck at writing. There's this like fundamental choice. And I think the yeah, getting there is the hard part. And you said, like, are we able to face the reality of our lives? And I think that requires that we confront these very painful core beliefs through oftentimes discipline, through showing up every single day. And that is the point. It's like we've heard this a million times, like you got to confront the bad beliefs. But I think what we're bringing here with this Warrior 100 is like, yes, and you do that through discipline, and you do that through showing up every day and forcing yourself to, like, it's almost like I'm going to poke this belief every single day for 100 days, and eventually I will like relate to it differently, but only if I poke it every single day for 100 days or longer.
Yeah. That was really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel that a lot too. Actually, the very origin of the 100 days thing, it was my own fantasy of like, oh yeah, I can be disciplined. I can commit to stuff. And this little voice in my head being like, yeah, but you've never done it. Never done anything longer than like those 30-day challenges, bro. Like, can you? And there came a point where I was like, I'm gonna prove it to myself. Like, Jesus, okay, sure, bring it the fuck on. Like, yeah, I can do this. And many people right now are going through the realization of like, oh, maybe this wasn't as easy as I thought. Because when you're sitting there on your armchair eating potato chips, you're like, yeah, 100 days, it's not even like a third of a year. Easy. It's like, yeah, okay, do it like that. And again, it's just, this is always it's just always the fundamental thing, because action is the thing that ties your ideas into reality, right? It's like the bridge. And so it's like, do it. Like, I dare you. One of the things that this is actually why I would argue you need, I would actually argue need as in it's a necessity, but at the very least, it is extremely beneficial to have a very deliberate container and structure around this. Because if you're just, again, if you're not in something with intentionality, something with bumpers to keep you on track, you know, you're day in, day out cruising Twitter for 4 hours and you're not really investigating any of the core beliefs. Are these true? Which one is most present for me? Which one comes up the most when I struggle? What is my coping mechanism in response to that? How do I respond? Do I like how I respond? You don't get to go through any of that process because you're not in the arena actually working on it. And yeah, this is the content structure thing, right? Where it's like the challenges and the disciplines we select are extremely potent by themselves, but it's also your adventure through this container. One of the things I'm hooked on right now that relates to this is the two definitions of discipline. I've written about this before. There's discipline in the sense of like sustained effort over time. Like, oh, that person is so disciplined. They've been running each morning for a year, right? There's that definition of discipline. There's also the definition of discipline as a field of study, like the discipline of Kung Fu or the discipline of biology. Like biology is a scientific discipline. And one of the things that is like, it's exciting and intimidating to me is what would happen if you surrendered into a discipline, right? Because you would have to look at some very difficult things. It's actually taking a leap of faith. It's cultivating the courage to say, I trust the outcome of this process enough that I'm going to submit myself to it. A very real example to ground this in an example, because that can sound a little weird, is yoga. Yoga is a comprehensive discipline, right? It has ways to eat. It has things you should eat. It has ethics and morals that you should adhere to. It has physical practices that you should do. And actually, if someone submitted their will to the discipline of yoga, I think they actually come out a really good person, right? They have an ethical foundation. They have a physical foundation. They have a nutritional foundation, all of that stuff. It's this hesitancy where it's like, yeah, okay, kind of like I'll dip my toe in this thing and try it, that actually messes us up a lot. I say all of this to tie it back into the "it will break you before it rebuilds you" comment that you made, because it's true. The arc of the experience is a very quick, sobering, like dose of reality, like a cold shower. Like, oh wow, we're kind of picking on writing. We're both writers, so I guess it works. Like, oh wow, my writing is way worse than I thought. Right? There's way less likes on my Substack articles than I thought there was going to be. And like feel the pain of that. And then because you're doing it regularly, you get to notice the response you have over time. Right? Oh, now I've lost motivation. Now I'm not going to write for 2 weeks. Right? Oh, now I'm back to Googling how to do it instead of doing the thing. And then it becomes less about the actual action and more about the belief you have around yourself. And it's like Duncan Trussell, I actually heard say this the best. And this is a visceral metaphor because I genuinely believe it to be true. He was like, if you break your arm and it heals incorrectly and you go to a doctor, the thing you need to do is you need to re-break the bone, set it again in alignment, and let that heal. And a lot of us depends on kind of how you feel about modern culture, but intentionally or unintentionally kind of have a psyche that like grew up incorrectly, right? Like a lot of the things we value are really, really backwards, right? We kind of highlighted the worship of money instead of virtue as one of those like ways we're psychologically kind of unhealthy. And yeah, the process to go through that is you need to break that, set it again in a more aligned, healthy way, and let it heal and let it go through that. This is a really the other obvious metaphor that has become, or mythology that I resonate a lot with, is the phoenix. It's why we have phoenix culture, right? Because it's a very literal metaphor. It's like the old you with these core beliefs and core identity narratives is going to die. You will come back. You will be reborn into something new, beautiful, fresh, vital, vigor, whatever you want. But you have to go through that death process first. And some of it is kind of cheeky, like, oh, this is personal transformation. Some of it is very real, like, oh my God, this is who I am. What am I supposed to do now? Like, it's very confronting work. And my last comment here is this is very specifically why the length of time of this experience is really important. This is not something, this is not a process that you can create the conditions for and complete successfully in 2 weeks. Right? This is not something that 30 days will have you like one and done, just out the door, back on your way. Like this stuff lives at the level of how your genes express themselves, of like your intuitions and your instincts. And actually changing that, changing it from the conceptual down into the physical, into the emotional, into the psycho-spiritual takes time, takes a lot of time. And it needs, again, that container to hold it. And that is why, again, just as much as the actual disciplines, the 100-day length is intentional, is deeply purposeful, because you need the time in that container, in that sacred space, to go through that literal initiation, identity transformation. Because you can make it through, but it's hard.
There's something really important here, which is creating spaces of no escape. You talked about like, can you
Ooh.
do this on your own? Could you just commit to doing 100 days and just do it by yourself? Maybe, but it's going to be infinitely harder to just say, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to sheer willpower my way through it by myself in a lone wolf way, to just do these things for 100 days. We talked about the example before of the Zen monastery. The Zen monastery is a great example because you're going to go and you're going to have absolutely no distractions possible, and your whole schedule is going to be created for you. And so you're just going to go through the motions, but you're going to have no escape. So you could be on day 6 of a Zen meditation retreat. You don't have access to a phone. You don't have, you are forced to sit with every single thought that comes up. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do here with the Warrior 100 community is you have people here that know if you're hitting the challenges or not. You have people here that there's something empowering about everyone starting on the same day as well. I've been realizing this as well. I've told some people about the Warrior 100 challenge, and there's something that having all of us start on the exact same day. So we're all 23 days in at the same time. We're all 76 days in at the same time, that we can be like, oh, I just hit day 50. I have this self-doubt arising. I feel like I don't know, like what we were just talking about with it will bring up these stories, these it'll force you to confront aspects of yourself. It's likely going to force many, many, many people to confront aspects of themselves. and likely at similar aspects of the challenge, phases of the challenge as well. Like if
Yeah.
we're 50 days in, there's likely going to be quite a few other people that are going through this experience together. Are like, yo, are you feeling the self-doubt? Oh yeah, I'm feeling the self-doubt too. All right, like how are you relating to it? I'm relating to it this way. All right, let's keep pushing through. Um, here's what I found helpful or something like that. Like there's something about as you were speaking, I was pitting these two things against each other in my mind. This sort of ascetic, like do it by myself, and this community. And as I was thinking, I was like, all right, the more that I do the Hero 100 challenge, I feel like I'm becoming more ascetic in a certain way because I no longer feel like I have the time to go out and like I don't know, just do the normal things that I used to do. I no longer have the time to just like go vibe at the park with some or like go to a party or I don't know, like all of these things that arise that are like that I could do on any given week. I am now very selective with what I say yes to because I'm like, no, I actually like this challenge, this Hero 100, this Warrior 100 challenge, it's like it takes a long time. And so by the time I finish the daily challenges that maybe take like up to 2 hours, I start realizing viscerally that I only have like 6 other hours in the day to actually like do the things that I find valuable. And that is not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time at all. So if I give someone 2 hours of my time to go hang out, and all of a sudden I have like maybe a couple hours to do the things I care about outside of the challenges and outside of like just hanging out and just like shooting the shit. And so I start realizing that there's like this asceticism that comes with it, but also the community aspect. It's like there is a community of people going through it at the same time, which is different than a community of people wanting to go drink on the weekends or something like that. Like they're both communal, but in completely different ways. And so yeah, I think it's really important to like go inwards and to start saying no to so many things and also to be like, yo, and also people are also on day 30 of the challenge and we're all struggling together. And there's a certain camaraderie in that that also pushes me while also being a lone wolf or an ascetic in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, putting the vibes out there that one day we'll be able to build a physical space where people can come hang out with us and do this challenge in person. For now, we have to do it digitally. Um, yeah, the lone wolf I have to bear the burden of existence by myself is a shadow of the hero. Like the healthy integration is it's not all up to me. I'm not the savior of the planet. There are actually already people doing this. I just, because I've been so focused on I have to do this all myself, I haven't even been looking for them. There are people out there in support. And yeah, I think it's even just like having people celebrate you, right? Like there's real beauty that comes from knowing. It's actually helped me a lot personally with the Hero 100 challenge, knowing it's helped me overcome resistance that has come up, knowing that there's like solidarity with hundreds of other people who are also like, fuck, I don't want to go do this right now. And I actually it helps me just like skirt around resistance where it's like, no, dude, I'm in it with the squad. Like, I'm not just in it with me. Like, do it for the squad, man. And it helps considerably. There's something really important. This actually surprised me when I first started seeing people in the 100 days challenge make this call, which is sometimes people had an event or a friend visiting or, something happened in their family where they made the conscious decision like, I'm going to miss today. I'm voluntarily not going to do the challenge today because there's something that is meaningful to me in my life that I want to go and be able to do. And at first I had this like, you're making excuses kind of. I had my initial reaction to that was like that. But actually, I've also, over the time of the challenge, made some of those decisions myself. And I think the thing that is really important there is it's it's essentially training intentionality. I am here because I chose to be. I am doing this because I chose it, not because I was uncomfortable and it was Friday night and I had to escape my life. So I just went out, or just because someone texted me and there was something to do. And so may as well. It's like, no, I had things to do and I chose this. It's also right in the absence of things to do. It's, yeah, like this is one of the things that was really difficult for, I think, a lot of us, is you have to create the space for this challenge to fit into your life. It's possible. It's also difficult, right? There's a considerable amount of just energetic hours each day that this takes. And even that process of like, oh, I guess I can't be on Facebook for an hour a day if I want to hit all of these challenges. Like, even that, wrestling with that thing, I guess 3 Netflix episodes a night is too much. Maybe if I dropped one and use that for my meditation time, I could, this would fit really nicely. Like that whole dancing, sparring process of even just being intentional enough with how you spend your time to make the challenges work is part of it. Is part of it. And the other side of it is, yeah, like I chose this. I wanted this. I am in integrity. I am bringing my life into alignment. And yeah, I'm making legitimate trade-offs and decisions because of that. Yeah, it's hard. I will also say, like, it's not forever, right? I would love for these challenges to become like day in, day out parts of people's lives, but it's 100 days. You can go back to whatever the heck you want after.
Yeah, and there's also this, the why has to be strong enough.
Yeah.
And I think this is why this podcast is important, because we're really laying out the why really in depth. Because when I hit day 70 something of the Hero 100, I started doubting the challenges, and I think it was just because I lost sight of the why of like what is underneath just the challenges. So I personally think it's very hard to stick with something for 100 days if there is no why under it. If it's like, oh, I'm just gonna do these, oh, just because meditation is good for me and exercising is good for me, that's why I'm gonna do it. If that's your why, like good luck. I don't think you're gonna make it to 100 days, like genuinely. But if your why is, I want to develop these virtues and I want to live in alignment and integrity with myself, I want to develop courage as a virtue, I want to develop, like, I want to show, if you have very specific ones, I want to show up for my family differently, I want to build a life where I'm showing up, where how I make money and what I do in the world is in alignment with what I love and desire. If that is your why, that's going to be a lot more motivating, especially when you get to day 60 through 90, when it starts getting really freaking hard. And yeah, so there's something to be said about how strong are you, how clear is it to you why you're actually doing this? Can you just recommit to that over and over and over again?
I don't know why. It's actually like one of the greatest lines of all time, and it just so happens to have come from Optimus Prime in one of the Transformer movies. He says, "Fate rarely calls upon us at a moment of our choosing." And there's something fantastic to that. Like, there is a moment, there will be many moments in your life where you very clearly have an option. Like, you very clearly have a choice, right? You see someone at the coffee shop that really excites you. You have a choice to either sit there and do nothing or go up and approach them. Um, a friend violates a value or a boundary that you have, and you have a choice to either suck it up or say something, because they keep doing that. They've been doing that for years, maybe. You see something on the street that you really disagree with, and you have a choice to actually show up for that or just keep walking. I think most people would be really disappointed to see a video played back in front of them of all the times they've had those moments in their lives and chose to do nothing about it. I think that would be really confronting for a lot of people. And there's something, again, it sounds kind of cheeky, but I mean it very genuinely. If I'm tired and it's 9:30 p.m. and I can't bring myself to journal for 20 minutes because I'm kind of tired and kind of uncomfortable, on what basis do I think I'm ever going to make the more courageous decision in any of those times? But on the flip side, I'm coming off a long night, but this happened to me like last week, right? I had some friends over. My personal ritual in the Hero 100 is getting up at sunrise. So we had people stay over late, and it was like, well, I'm still getting up the next day. It's winter here in Argentina. Everything is super cold. And it's like, I do not want to get under a cold shower right now. Like, there's nothing about it that is appealing to me. There's nothing about it. I know that I'll feel better afterwards. I know that it's a commitment to myself. And just that, just like, I know on a longer term timeline, I want this. Immediately right now, I don't. I have a whole lot of resistance. I have a whole lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, discomfort, blah, blah, blah. And yet I acknowledge that, I accepted it, and I did it. Like, when that moment, when the woman in the red dress moment happens, I actually have a track record. I have evidence in my past of, okay, I'm a little intimidated. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if it's going to work, but I know it's in alignment with the things that I care about. I am going to do it, and I'm going to bring the greatest degree of presence and effort that I can to it and see what happens. And honestly, if people did that as their identity, as the habitual, natural response, I'm going to do the thing that's in alignment. I'm going to acknowledge fear and do it anyways. I'm going to do it with the greatest degree of presence and effort that I can. Their lives would fundamentally change. Because here's a little side note as well. This is about facing reality. I think one of the reasons people are chronically distracted is because it gives them an excuse of never having actually tried their best. Right? Oh, my boss didn't like my report. That's okay. I was watching Netflix at the same time as writing it. Right? Oh, they didn't like that article. That's okay. I was also on Facebook while I wrote it. Right? If I actually tried my best, it'd be way better. Right? But you never actually put your best foot forward. Right? And that's a tragedy, quite frankly. Go your whole life never actually just trying. Full on, full in, like, yeah, I could fail, but I'm gonna fucking try.
This is exactly what we were talking about earlier with the writing example.
Yep.
Steven Pressfield talks about this, like, a professional artist has real failures, an amateur artist doesn't. And basically, it's the idea that, and yeah, this is what I was naming earlier with bringing up the difficult stuff about myself, is that if I have a real failure, what does that mean about me? And like, if I have a real failure, that brings up internal beliefs that I have myself that are negative much more intensely than if I don't have a real failure. Right? It's like, and I think that's what you were pointing to, is if I was on Netflix while I was writing the article, then I can convince myself that it's not a real failure and it doesn't mean anything about me. Whereas if I full on try and it fails and it flops,
Yeah.
I have to confront something about myself. And kind of separate point that I wanted to bring up But this is an amazing book called The Courage to Be by Paul Tillich. And um, one of the virtues of a warrior is courage, as we've mentioned many times. And I think we've also hit the point that sometimes courage can be co-opted for bad things, for bad purposes, or like I don't think that many people see courage in and of itself as inherently virtuous, just as something that helps us overcome obstacles. But the reframe by Paul Tillich is courage in and of itself is the one virtue that gives rise to all the other virtues. He basically says courage is he basically says all virtue stems from the courage to be, which and this is also something we've touched on with facing death, and like, are you facing the reality of your life that is you're gonna die? And basically how Tillich frames it is that all of all virtues arise from looking non-being slash death in the face and choosing to show up courageously in spite of it. That is the essence of his book. And I think that the courage to face the fears of approaching someone or of failing, I think, are secondary to the courage of face looking the reality of our lives, the reality of death in the face, and saying, I have the courage to show up and commit myself to pursuing goodness, truth, and beauty, and making the world a more beautiful place, and being in integrity with myself, truth, and doing good unto others. And yeah, when you talk about distraction and like not ever fully like facing confronting my life, it's like, yeah, how am I gonna go? It's a really easy excuse when that kind of fear of reality starts coming up, that fear of death starts coming up. It's a really effective way to get out of showing up with courage in any other situation. Oh shit, I was like kind of had this fear of death come up. Oh, that's all right that I didn't approach the person or do the thing, right? It's like it's a very effective excuse, and there's something to be said about the warrior virtue of I'm going to show up every day and I know that I'm going to die someday and I'm still going to show up and have courage in spite of it.
Yeah, there's some. Ooh. One of the things that I think is a gift of the warrior energy is like, yeah, you run up against your limits and you say, wow, I'm really not good at this. But what the warrior does almost immediately after that is they're like, I'm not good at this yet. Right. And that, you know, flips it. It opens the gate of possibility from this is a defining, permanent, unchanging judgment of me as a human being to, oh, this is a cultivated skill. I'm a human. I can cultivate skills. I can get better at this. Let me train it. Right. It makes it this, it flips it from this existential thing to this playful, like, oh, yeah. Great. I like this. I want to get better at writing. I want to get better at sculpting. Let's go. How can I enter into the discipline of it? How can I be shaped by it? How can I get better at it? So yeah, that comment of like yet is, yeah, very classic warrior. It's like I find my limit, but and this is almost the positive framing of being willing to die over and over again into it. Because yeah, the person who has the limit right here needs to die so that the person who has the limit plus 5 steps out can be born, right? Like your identity isn't, you have, this gets much more Eastern philosophy than many of us approach, but like you can die day in, day out, moment to moment in the practice. The person I am no longer exists now and now and now. And that opens the door to freedom of I am no longer contained by any limits, at least currently. And then it's the game, right? It's the game of what is my current limit? What is my current best? And when you reach it, it's not finality. It's yet. It's like, this is the best I got right now. And yeah, we have, I have a deep desire for people to get excited about those games of, instead of it going of this is how much money I can make right now, it's this is how courageous I can be right now. Right? It's not this is how many followers I have right now. This is how much I can express love right now and actually find the limits of deeper and more, I would argue, more beautiful like virtues, values, and character traits. And again, I think as we're saying, like if someone lands with this, like this is what we're doing. Like this is literally what we're doing. This is what the four disciplines are made to cultivate. Yes, they're insanely valuable by themselves, but this is the name of the game here. Like this is holistic self-mastery, holistic development, holistic growth. Um, yeah, and I think for some it's exciting. It's certainly a humbling process, right? You can only walk through the fires of transformation so much and keep an inflated ego, right? At some point, it's just like you before we started recording, or maybe in this conversation. I mean, uh, one sec. Yeah, I think the essence of that point was it's just a very humbling process to go through, right? But it's almost, that process is parallel with how close you actually get, how intimate you get with reality as it is, right? The more grounded you get, the more you come down to what is here and now. This is what I'm good at. This is what my weaknesses are. These are the resources I have. This is what matters to me. And there's a very fine connection between the two of those. Of yeah, I've been humbled many times, and I also see more clearly now because of that.
Yeah, I really felt that. Want to notice the time? Almost 2 hours. I think there's one last point that feels valuable to wrap in here, which is being a beacon. Um,
Oh, nice.
when we think about how do we most adequately be in service of something larger than ourselves, um, it has a tone of, yeah, in service of the collective in some way, in service of everyone around me, also lifting them up. And then when you think, how do I do that? It's like if I fully face death, this courage to face the most difficult aspects of my life, such as death, then it's like we've talked on the podcast about this generator frequency thing, this cymatic frequency thing. And it's almost like I get this sense that if someone overcomes the fear of death, that they're just operating in a way that's like can be picked up by other people. Right. It's like so I have this assumption that 99.9% of people have this fear of death, whether it's named as that or not. And if someone were to, I still fear death deeply every single day. It's something I've been trying to confront as much as I can, but I can't say that I don't fear death. If someone were to like really meaningfully work with the fear of death and like make meaningful progress in quotes, like make meaningful change their relationship to it in a meaningful way, it would be noticeable by everyone that interacts with that person in a way
Yeah.
that supports every single person they interact with, that supports the collective just by virtue of changing how they're relating to other people, because that fear of death is not a motivating factor in that relationship. And so being a beacon for others showing up differently and not spouting how people should show up, but just showing up differently. Um, feels like a really great byproduct of this challenge.
This is the prove it thing again. Yeah. You know, a lot of people have this thing of like, the current government shouldn't be in power because the way that I think should be the thing in power, and that would fix everything. And it's like, prove it, bro. Can you even make yourself a living, embodied example of your philosophy and demonstrate that it actually is beautiful and true and good? Like, if you can't turn yourself into a living specimen of the ideals and values that you hold, not much to, can't really critique what other people are trying to do there. Yeah, there is. I mean, the beacon thing is really central. Like, it's really core to me. For no fault of their own, a lot of people wait for permission. A lot of people wait for someone to give them the permission to be who they are and do the things that they want to do. And you can actually cultivate that as a kind of way of being, right? Living the example, like there is something, this is another very pernicious thing I think that is true in culture, which is we almost mock people who try really hard to become a good person. Oh, you're too honest. Oh, like there are actual comments that get made like this, like, oh, you're trying too hard. Like, why do you have such an obsession with being good? Or like, why are you always sticking to your values? Like, why can't you just do this one thing? And how backwards of a world have we gotten into where that is actually something that is kind of mocked or laughed or frowned upon? Um, it feels there's something, yeah, there's something very strange in that. And I think it's on people. I think it's on all of us to actually go against that. And yeah, like there's beauty in actually striving to become the absolute, to become the greatest version of yourself that you actually can even imagine. This is why the hero is actually helpful though, because you like set big sights and then use the warrior to actually get there. Um yeah, and I think right now when I look around, there's so much more. I feel like there was something in the current programs and protocols and offerings and philosophies that I found just lacking. Right? Like there's more to becoming the best version of yourself than your heart rate variability or your sleep score, right? Or how much free testosterone you have in your bloodstream. Probably helpful, but like I feel like our current greatest aim, or the subculture that is most popular aiming to become a good person, is the biohackers. It's like there's way more than your sleep score to becoming the best version of yourself. Like there's more to you than just your physicality, right? And yeah, so it's like out of frustration, it's been built. It's been, where are the people who are actually working on cultivating virtue, on cultivating integrity with themselves, and being willing to look at how often they lie to themselves and share white lies with other people and actually course correct on that and view that as something that they don't want to do. So yeah, yeah, that is the, I mean, that's it. Like become an example, make yourself an example, submit yourself to the discipline of becoming excellent, holistically excellent. Imbalances on almost any of these domains, body, mind, heart, spirit, leads to problems for you or for others or both. They have to kind of happen in lockstep. And so we made it. And if any of this lands with you, like come hang out. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be really freaking hard and it's gonna be really freaking beautiful.
Yeah, it's gonna be really hard. um, and we're still gonna do it anyway. Something that never really landed with me that has recently been landing is how this word self-deception. I was pointing to that as I never really had a pointer of that word to anything in my life. But recently, through this conversation, especially, I feel like we've named the many ways that the individual and the culture is engaged in self-deception and why that is not good and why we need to build something that counteracts that. I think that's what the Warrior 100 does. That's why I'm so excited about it these days.
Mm.
Because I feel like it meaningfully helps us overcome the deceptions that we're living. And it shows why not doing that is catastrophic.
Yeah, literally. It's not even a joke. Yeah, it's not hyperbole. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking with me today on the Warrior 100. I know we're both excited about this project that we're building, and yeah, it feels really great to elaborate and deep dive on all of the reasons that it is so inspiring and central to our lives. So thank you.
Love it. Thank you, dude.